task force members, I want to go through these for a short presentation and we'll have general discussion before we move to public testimony. Amy, do you want to take the second part, accountability, empowerment, and support?
Sure. So I think I just wanted to echo Roger's comment at the end, which, you know, it's certainly not lost on me, and I think with many of my colleagues in the task force, that just because a group of outsiders got together and started talking about these issues, that in and of itself does not create change. We're all aware of that. I think what we tried to do was, you know, how can we put some new thinking, fresh thinking into, you know, the problem statement as it's set out, and how can we create a framework for you which you can then build on and execute against. The area that I wanted to talk about is, you know, how can we, you know, give those recommendations and maybe new ideas and new recommendations the best chance of success of actually driving change. And one of the pieces that we talked about is how do we, you know, define and elevate accountability within the agency for safety. You know, it needs to be someone's full-time job and responsibility, and that person needs to be at a pretty senior level in the agency. So that was kind of one concept that we talked about. The other is, you know, what Roger mentioned is how can we actually empower and support the frontline employees to, you know, actually drive this culture change as well. It's not just about the group of people sitting in a room far away. It is about the folks who are kind of driving the buses, driving the trains, are out there dealing with the public. So that was kind of the themes around this section. So one of our recommendations, we know that the K&J report talked about, you know, a new role, a director of safety. One of the things that we discussed and agreed upon is that for safety to be, you know, of utmost importance and to be a value, not just a priority, we need to elevate this role. We need to elevate the discussion, and we need to make sure that safety doesn't become secondary to other priorities of the agency. So our recommendation is that that role actually becomes an executive level position and sits at the table with, you know, the folks on the executive committee who kind of make some big decisions on a day-to-day basis for TriMet. So I think that was one of our recommendations. In addition, a lot of these proposals that we're putting out there, we expect that this person and their span of control would be responsible for executing against. So that would be kind of part of their position, and their task is to, you know, move on some of these recommendations. The second thing we talked about when we get more to the empowerment and support of actually frontline employees, one of the things we really wanted to look at is how do we embody and safety as a value into, you know, when you actually evaluate new employees all the way through training and the evaluation of their performance. And we need to make sure we talked, you know, we definitely heard from some of the information that we got that safety is something you can actually measure new employees on. You know, it can be something that you look at. And, you know, from day one of folks who come into TriMet, folks need to have that as sort of an inherent value of who they are. And that's going to be one of the better tactics for success, to make sure that they're going to continue on holding that value strongly throughout their career at TriMet. So we talked a lot about hiring and training. To hit a little bit on what Roger mentioned, you know, how do we actually make the job of an operator something that is, you know, people feel proud about, people feel that they're able to do a good job, and thus take a bit more awareness and overall have better, just a sense of their environment if they're feeling good about themselves and their job and what they're doing. So we talked a lot about some recognition programs that actually focus specifically on safety, not necessarily for performance per se, but safety as a way to track individuals specifically. The last thing we talked a little bit is, you know, we didn't necessarily land on how we do this, but we do think there's an opportunity for TriMet and the leadership of TriMet to work with ATU leadership and at least kind of come to some collective understanding on what safety as a value means for all of its employees, and drive to some consensus on how that actually can be executed against. So again, kind of broad brush recommendations, and I think we all realize that they're broad brush, but I think those were what we intended was, here's the foundation that we can build upon.
Amy, thank you. Yeah. Steph, on communication and engagement.
Well, I think that's a great beginning, like the idea of these being next steps and how we can use the culture surrounding TriMet as well as within TriMet to really put forward some of these recommendations that we've kind of arrived at with a lot of input from members of the community as well as employees, and put those forward and also kind of hone them and get further input as we go along, because it definitely is, it's our hope that this is a living document, that it's revised and renewed with additional expertise. And I think actually a number of these came out of our first two meetings with in this room. And I'll just go over those first before I go into what we learned from employees. One, the language and definitions. I'm on pages 6 and 7, by the way. Anyone wants to read along? Number 6, the language and definitions. And we talked about this in our first meeting together. The accident versus others like collisions or crash. That part of the culture is really about the words that we use to define an event. And that accident, it doesn't, that we're not talking about, we're talking about the actual event, and when we talk about it aggregately, any number of events have so many circumstances within them that I think that accident doesn't really envelop the kind of the baseline, if this makes any sense to anyone besides me. But the idea that something like collision and crash refers to the physical event, whereas accident kind of brings in a lot of emotional context that might not be represented across multiple events. So, and then 4 and 5, community advisory committee. We heard from people within this community, and also in this room and beyond, that there's a great wealth of information and experience of people who use TriMet as part of their daily lives, and to have them as part of the decision-making process proactively to really help with that service excellence component. And then, and actually I think this is great, community conversations will be required to harness the knowledge of all constituents and thereby improve the safety of the region's public transportation for everyone. I think that's my favorite sentence in this section. Also engagement with partner organizations, because there's a number of jurisdictions and a lot of agencies as well as nonprofit partner organizations that can, I think, help map further resources and assets for hazard identification and different strategies about ongoing safety. And that was something that we heard from a number of different testimony and partners. Employee engagement and strategic data sharing. This we heard resonantly from employees. I started to talk about this. I don't care so much about the idea that employees be supported and listened to in all parts of their process. We talked about the safety committees that are throughout TriMet, and also the idea of holding regular meetings, that when there is feedback on a specific hazard that operators identify, that is recognized and that they get feedback that assures them that their comments have been heard. That's what we have. And I'll look forward. And actually, I also want to, just a side note, I was not here the last meeting, and I just wanted to apologize for everyone. It was a previous